Hello, hi, hey, my name is Michaela Ray, and today, we're coming back at you again with another video. Okay, this video is going to be another true crime video on a murderer. What up? I know it's been a while since I've uploaded one of these, probably like 2 weeks. I do apologize. I've kind of posted some update videos. If you're interested in why, go check those out. They'll probably be in the description down below. So today we are actually going to be talking about Elizabeth Bathory. And for those of you who do not know who Elizabeth Bathory is, I'm gonna educate you, number one. But number two, she is also known as the Blood Countess, and she is very, very popular in lore for taking baths in virgin's blood to retain her youthfulness. So that is the character we are talking about today. As per usual, I have my laptop right here. With a bunch of notes, and again, there's going to be no makeup in this video because I have, again, 6 pages of notes to read and go through. I don't know if I'm going to continue doing makeup during these videos because honestly, it's really hard to try and concentrate. So this might just be the new style. I might just change the name. I don't know yet. But we're just gonna jump right in. Alrighty. So we're going to start with, who is Elizabeth Bathory? Elizabeth Bathory was born on August 7th of 1560 and died on August 21st of 1614, making her about 64 when she died, which is pretty old for that time, not gonna lie. She was a Hungarian noblewoman and speculated serial killer, and is one of the oldest serial killers in history. So that's also cool, but not at the same time. Like, that's kind of bad, but it's kind of cool. She was born to the Bathory family at the estate of, I'm going to butcher this so bad, so I'll probably put it on the screen somewhere, Nyírbátor, Kingdom of Hungary, and spent her childhood at Exed Castle. Her father was Baron George VI Bathory of Exed Branch, and her mother was Baroness Anna Bathory, who passed away in she was 1539 to 1570. I couldn't really find too many dates for, her dad. So she was the daughter of Stephen Bathory of Somlio. Again, I'll probably put some of these in the screen somewhere so you guys can see what I'm trying to say, because I don't speak Hungarian. I am not going to try to either. Through her mother's side, she was the niece of a Hungarian nobleman, Stefan Bathory, or Stephen, who was the King of Transylvania, the Duke of Lithuania, and the Prince of Transylvania. Her older brother, Stephen Bathory, was the royal judge of Hungary. History says that Elizabeth's parents were first cousins, and that is why she had health problems. For those of you who do not know, it is not a good idea to have incestuous relationships, especially with people who are extremely closely related to you, like brothers, sisters, first cousins, moms, dads, those kinds of things, just because it can result in some nasty side effects as far as like birth defects or health issues go. Now, that being said, in animal breeding, more specifically, I don't know so much about humans, but in animal breeding, you shouldn't interbreed litters, like brother and sister from a litter, but you can take the son and the mother and breed them. I'm not too sure about people, though. I don't think it would work the same way, so. But back then, incest was really common because they liked to keep it in the bloodline. So they wanted the bloodline to remain as pure as possible. In doing that, you have health risks associated with it. Obviously, at the time, they were not aware that there were health risks. We've come very far in that manner. So yeah, she did have health issues, most likely due to incest. So, as a child, she was said to have suffered from severe seizures, most likely caused from epilepsy due to inbreeding. Again, incest. This was also called the falling illness, and it was treated by rubbing blood of a non-sufferer on the lips and a piece of their skull as the seizure ended. So I have a roommate, for example, who has epilepsy. So had we been alive and friends at this point in time, when he was having a seizure, I would like slip my wrist or something. That was bad. Don't do that. like poke my finger, put blood on his lips, and somehow give him a piece of my skull. And that was supposedly supposed to help. Like, maybe they're dead. I don't know. That's my train of thought, though. Speculation says that Elizabeth's horrible crimes were in part to try to cure her illnesses, but there's no substantial evidence that points to this. So there's literally none, like, there's zero evidence saying, like, yeah, I killed these people because I wanted to cure my epilepsy. Like, that wasn't a thing. At least as far as research goes. Epilepsy is the fourth major cause of seizures and is caused by nerve cell disruption in the brain. So a really good analogy for that, sorry about all these clothes, a really good analogy for like nerve cell disruption in the brain would be like night terrors or sleepwalking, talking in your sleep, like those kinds of things. Like when you experience those kinds of things, there's a disruption that happens while you're asleep and your brain like turns on, well, not really, but like your body is active but your brain isn't. And when I was younger, and I still do to this day at 19 years old, have night terrors, and I would wake up and run around all over the place and trip over things. There was one time I tripped on like a box or something and I smacked my head on my dresser. For the longest time, my mother slept out on the couch while this was happening, because they were happening 2 or 3 times a night for like 2 years straight. And I just, like, my quality of sleep even now is just absolute trash. So if you suffer from night terrors, I sympathize with you wholeheartedly. I still have them to this day. They suck. And it's because of a disruption in the sleep cycle. So it's not the same, but it's kind of the same. It's a good analogy to explain disruption of the brain in a different circumstance. Another theory of her crimes is her own family taught her how to torture. The stories include watching brutal punishments carried out by family's officers and being taught by family involved in Satanism and witchcraft. But again, there's no concrete evidence to support this. And I really heavily encourage you guys to look into Satanism, because, I know this sounds crazy, because there are actually different branches of Satanism that practice different things. Like, not all Satanists are like, Hail Satan. That's not, there are like 3 different kinds of Satanists that I'm aware of. So please, I encourage you to do your research on that if that's something that you're interested in. It's really interesting. So, as a young girl, she was raised Protestant Calvinist. She learned to speak Latin, Greek, Hungarian, and German, and this was because of her elite status that she was born in. 90% of the time, females were not getting an education, like pretty much at all. But because of her social status and the fact that she was very wealthy and that she was noble, she was given an amazing education, better than what we have now. In all honesty, probably. They don't start, in the United States, they don't start teaching languages until you're in high school, which to me is absolutely ridiculous, because when you're a child, your brain literally absorbs it. Whereas an adult, you don't do that as much. Like, your brain doesn't absorb information the same. So props to Elizabeth. She can speak more languages than the average person. So that's pretty dope. Before her first marriage, it is alleged at the age of 13 she had a child. The child was said to be fathered by a peasant and was supposedly given to a local woman trusted by the Bathory family. Now, also, and if you guys didn't really know, back in the day, lifespans were extremely short compared to what they are now. And we are actually the first generation, my generation is the first generation that is projected to have a lower lifespan, a shorter lifespan than their parents, which is horrible. That's 100 years just down the drain, like right in the toilet. But because of the fact that these people were dying so young, because there wasn't such a thing as vaccinations, please vaccinate your kids. There wasn't such a thing as vaccinations. They didn't really have great medical and, you know, all these other kinds of things that we can really take advantage of nowadays that people choose not to. Sorry, I'm really against anti-vaccination. Vaccinate your kids, okay? That's why measles is making a comeback, and so is polio. Vaccinate your children. Thank you. But they started reproducing at a very young age because they weren't projected to live very long. So we don't do that now, though it is scientifically proven. Look it up. It is scientifically proven that it's actually better to start having children at a younger age because your body can handle it better. And obviously there are risks associated with pregnancies over, I think, the age of 35 or 40 for things like birth defects. So the woman was paid and the child was taken to Wichalia. Evidence of the pregnancy was found after her death. The rumors spread by peasants, so there's no positive validity to this claim. Sorry, I had to go get something. Okay, so we're gonna start talking about her marriage now. How I like to do these videos is give you a little bit about their past, and then we talk about the horrificness of it. You can tell a lot by what these people have done based on their childhood. Something that I've noticed is very common. So we're gonna talk about her marriage. Elizabeth was engaged at the age of 10 to Frinnick Nasady. Again, the name will be on the screen. The Baron of Tomas Nadasady D. Nadsed as Fargusfold. Yep. And Orsolia Canisse. Again, names will be on screen. It was probably a diplomatic marriage. Again, it makes sense for the time period. She refused to take her husband's name due to her having a higher status than him, and instead assumed the surname of Bathory, which is normally when women would marry, they would try to marry above them, but she was already like pretty high in station, so the only other thing that she could have done was married like a prince or a king, which obviously that did not happen, so she married below her, which means that he rose in station due to the marriage and therefore took her name. The couple married when Elizabeth was 15 and Nadasy was 19 at Verenov nad Toplo, or Verano in Hungarian, on May 8th of 1575. Approximately 4,500 people were invited to the wedding. Natady's gift to Elizabeth was Keshish Castle. I'll put the Hungarian translation in there. Situated in Little Carpathians near Nove Mesto nad Vahom and Trenčín in present-day Slovakia. I'm sorry, I'm butchering these really bad. The castle had been bought by his mother in 1569 and given to Nasady, who transferred it to Elizabeth during their nuptials, during their marriage, together with the Keshish country house and 17 adjacent villages. So she acquired a lot of land in this marriage. The castle was and still is surrounded by a village and agricultural lands bordered by outcrops of the Little Carpathians. From my understanding, the Little Carpathians is actually very nice, so Google it. In 1578, Nasady became chief commander of Hungarian troops, leading them into a war against the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans were really big at this point in time. There were a lot of people having a lot of problems with them. Unfortunately, Hungary was one of them, and it just wasn't a good situation. While he was away, Elizabeth managed the business affairs and the estates. This role held responsibility of the Hungarian and Slovak people, and even include providing medical care, more than what the United States does. Her daughter, Anna Nasady, was born in 1585 and was later to become wife of Nicola VI Zorinsky. Her other known children include Orsika Nasady, 1590 to unknown, would later become the wife of Estevan II Benyo Catalan, or Katharina Nasady, 1594 to unknown, Andreas Nasady, 1596 to 1603, so he was a youngin', he was around 9, 10. Paul Nasady, or P-A-L, how they pronounce, or how they spell it with like a thing. 1598 to 1650, so he was around for a little bit. Father of Frinnick Nasady. Frinnick II Nasady, sorry. Some works speculate that the couple, I'm so sorry, I cannot talk and I cannot read. Apparently my high school education is failing me. Clock it, American education system is great. Some works speculate that the couple had another son who is lesser known, Miklos Nadsity, which kind of reminds me of like Michael. But there's no evidence of this, and he could have been a cousin or could have died and was not written into the will. Georgi Nadsity was another supposed deceased infant of the Bathorys, but cannot be confirmed. All of Elizabeth's children were cared for by a governess, as she had been. Again, this was insanely common back in the day for people who were of higher station. They were raised by governesses and not by their parents. So Elizabeth probably spent very minimal amounts of time with her parents, which is unfortunate, but it's just how they worked back then. Elizabeth's husband, Fernick, died January 1st of 1604, making him around 48. It is unknown what caused his illness, but what is known is that it caused paralysis in his legs. This started in 1601. He became permanently disabled in 1603. When he passed in 1604, it ended a 29-year marriage that they had. Before dying, he entrusted his heirs and widow to Georgi Thurzo, who would later lead the investigation on Elizabeth. So he entrusted everything to Georgi Thurzo, who later on down the line royally screws Elizabeth. So, unfortunate for her. We're going to talk about the investigation now. Between 1602 and 1604, rumors had started to spread about her atrocities throughout the Hungarian kingdom. Lutheran minister Estevan Magyari made complaints against her to the court of Vienna and publicly. They took their time responding to the complaints made against her. Finally, in 1610, King Matthias II assigned Georgi the Palestine of Hungary to investigate. So he kind of like rose a little bit in that time span. Thurzo ordered 2 notaries to collect evidence. I'm so sorry. On March 1st of 1610? That's kind of what it looks like. I don't know. I don't know how to type, guys. In 1610 and 1611, the notaries collected over 300 witness statements. Trial records included the testimony of 4 defendants and 13 witnesses. Priests, noblemen, and commoners were questioned. Witnesses included the castellan and personnel from Sarvar Castle. They also owned Sarvar Castle. According to investigations, the initial victims were serving girls around the ages of 10 and 14, the daughters of peasants, many of whom were lured by kashish officers of well-paid lured to kashish by offers of well-paid work as servants and maids. Later, she is said to have killed the daughters of lower gentry. Gentry is like military, who were sent to her gymnasium, which is basically a fancy word for parlor, by their parents to learn courtly etiquette. Abductions were said to have occurred as well. So not only were they accused of luring and deceiving, but they were also accused of kidnapping, which is not good. Not good look for anybody. The atrocities most consistently described as severe beatings, burning and mutilation of hands, biting flesh off faces, arms, and other body parts, as well as freezing or starving to death, which all of those are pretty terrible. Have you ever had somebody bite you really hard? Because that crap hurts real bad. Have you ever burnt your fingers on the stove? Because that stuff hurts real bad too. Don't recommend doing it. The use of needles was also collaborated in court. I'm not talking needles like tattoo needles or piercing needles. I'm talking sewing needles. And I was reading something about this as well, where it was like she would stab them with the needles and they would like complain about it, and then she would keep stabbing them. So there's that. There were many suspected forms of torture Elizabeth used. According to Budapest City Archives, the girls were burned with hot tongs, then placed in freezing water. That just all around sounds pretty bad. She like branded them and then dipped them in cold water. I mean, I don't understand that. They were also covered in honey. Sorry, my phone's about to die. They were also covered in honey and live ants. She was also suspected of cannibalism. Cannibalism is when you eat your same species. So like, if a dog ate another dog, that'd be cannibalizing. If a human eats a human, that's cannibalizing. So some witnesses even named family members who had died while Elizabeth was present. Others reported seeing traces of torture on the bodies. Some were buried in graveyards and others in unmarked graves. 2 witnesses actually saw the Countess torture and kill. Elizabeth tortured and killed on every single one of her estates and some. So not only was she killing on her own property, but she was also doing sketch stuff off her property too, which is like not cool. Like I wouldn't be a fan of that. In addition, several people were named with helping with the procurement of young women to Elizabeth by deception or force. Torture and bloody orgies were supposedly carried out to accompany family celebrations, including her daughter's wedding and holidays. I'm not going to explain what an orgy is. If you want to know, look it up. Unless you're under the age of 18, please do not look that up. So now we're going to talk about her arrest. And again, there's a lot of weird names in here. I'll probably butcher them. It's said that Thurzo went to Kashish Castle after Christmas on December 31st of 1610 and caught Elizabeth in the act of actually torturing somebody. Thurzo arrested Bathory and 4 of her servants who were accused of being her accomplice. Dortoya, Simtes, Ileana Jo, Katarina Benica, and Janos Ushvari. Ibis or Fico. I don't know what that means. Thurzo's men reportedly found 1 girl dead and 1 dying, and reported the other woman was found wounded while others were locked up. The Countess was put under house arrest. Although commonly believed Elizabeth was caught in the act of torture, there's little evidence to support this. Somebody wasn't dotting their I's, crossing their T's. That's what I'm getting from that. Thurzo declared to the village and her guests that he had caught her, but she was arrested and detained before discovery and presentation of victims. Thurzo debated further proceedings with Elizabeth's son Paul and 2 of her sons-in-law. A trial and execution would have caused public scandal and disgraced a noble and influential family, which at the time had ruled all of Transylvania, and Elizabeth's considerable property would have been seized by the crown. So this is a huge risk for her, even if this actually did happen, which a lot of this could have been extremely politically motivated, and we'll get into the conspiracies a little bit later about that. But it could have been very, very heavily politically influenced, and none of this could have actually happened. So, but the thing is that we don't really know, because it happened so long ago, and back then they didn't really keep records like what they do now. As you guys have noticed, as I've been like reading this, a lot of this stuff cannot be validated, which is unfortunate, or rather fortunate. Unfortunate in the case of her, as like there wasn't a lot of evidence to actually convict her, aside from like testimonies, like bodies and stuff like that didn't really line up with that. And it's fortunate for us because she's dead. So, you know, if somebody like that were hanging around nowadays, they would literally be tried and executed like immediately. Which also I'm going to do a current news update probably at the end of this video. So, Thurzo, along with Paul and her 2 sons-in-law, originally planned for Elizabeth to be spirited away to a nunnery, but as accounts of her murder of the daughters of lesser nobility spread, it was agreed that Elizabeth Bathory should be kept under strict house arrest and that further punishment should be avoided. So they basically just settled on like arresting her until the trial, just to like kind of leave everything out of it. King Matthias urged Thurzo to bring Elizabeth to trial and suggested she be sentenced to death, but Thurzo successfully convinced the king that such an act would adversely affect the nobility. Thurzo's motivation for such an intervention is debated by scholars, and was decided by Matthias that it was decided that Matthias would not have to repay his large debt to Elizabeth. So this king owed her a bunch of debt. So that also makes me kind of just believe that she wasn't actually guilty of these things, and people were just like trying to clear the way a little bit, you know. So now we're gonna talk about her trials. There were 2 trials held. One of them was January 2nd of 1611, and the other one was January 7th of 1611. Up to 35 people testified daily during the trial, which is a lot. All but 1 servant testified against Elizabeth. In addition to the testimonies, they also pulled out skeletons and cadaver parts as evidence. And for those of you guys who do not know what a cadaver is, it is a dead person that still has their stuff intact. as in like skins and stuff. There's actually a cadaver place down in Tennessee, if I'm not wrong, and it's actually kind of cool. I would love to be able to go and visit. Basically what they do is, like, when people donate their body to science, they're called cadavers at that point, and they can use them for medical research, or they can mainly medical and forensic. So they'll put different bodies in like different types of environments to watch the decay rates, to help further investigations and stuff like that, and just further the knowledge that we have already. So it's kind of a cool thing. Also, if you donate your body to science, which I do recommend doing, for those of you guys who are concerned about dying, I don't know, I do recommend doing it. It's a really cool thing to do. Also, make sure you're an organ donor. People need organs, guys. The exact amount of victims is unknown, though 2 servants came forward and said 35 to 37 were killed in just their time of service. Other defendants suggested around 50 or more. Many castle personnel said between 100 and 200 bodies were removed from the castle of Sarvar. A servant who spoke at the trial alleged around 650 victims' names supposedly in Elizabeth's own handwriting. The 650 number could not be confirmed, so the official count remained at 80. The location of the diaries with the names of victims is unknown, but 32 letters written by Elizabeth are at the Hungarian State Archives in Budapest. So if you live around Budapest, or you're gonna go visit there and you like true crime stuff, maybe check that out and let me know. Now we're going to talk about prison and death. Bathory was in prison at Kashish Castle and put in solitary. She was kept in a bricked up room with only small holes for ventilation and for passing food back and forth. And I know this is going to sound really silly, but if you were in a room, for example, that does not have a vent, even if it's a large room, if it does not have a vent or an air hole or anything like that to allow oxygen in, you will suffocate. At some point, you will run out of oxygen and suffocate. So this was extremely important. Obviously. She was in prison for 4 years until her death. In the evening of August 21st of 1614, Elizabeth complained to her bodyguard that she wasn't feeling well. He replied, "It's nothing, mistress. Just go lie down." She went to sleep and was found dead the following morning. She was buried at the church of Kashish on November 25th of 1614. However, according to some sources, villagers were in an uproar over Elizabeth being buried on church grounds. Her body was reportedly moved to her birth home at Exeter and was put in the family crypt. The location of her body is still unknown to this day. Kashish church and castle show no markings of a potential grave. So they don't actually know what happened to her body, which is weird and creepy. And again, I don't know how to pronounce these names. I keep saying that throughout the video, but it's just really true. Several authors, such as Laszlo Nagy and Dr. Irmas, not even going to try, something hyphen Cardos, have argued that Elizabeth Bathory was a victim of a conspiracy. Nagy argued that everything against Bathory was political, potentially due to her extensive wealth and land holdings, escalating her husband's death. Escalating after her husband's death, sorry. Like we said before, Elizabeth was very powerful. She owned a lot of land. The king even owed her a debt. So as you can see, like, that could be something that is extremely politically motivated, and they're like, yeah, we need to do something about her because this is going to cause a problem. The theory is actually pretty consistent with the state of Hungary at the time, which included religious and political conflicts, particularly relating to the wars against the Ottoman Empire at the time, as well as the spread of Protestantism and the expansion of Habsburg over Hungary. However, there are counter-arguments against this theory, mainly that the investigation started because of Lutheran minister Magyari. This does not contribute to the Catholic Habsburg plot against her, although religious tension is still a possible source of conflict because Elizabeth was raised as a Calvinist and not Lutheran, and apparently she also partially practiced witchcraft and Satanism. So take that as you choose. To support her innocence, the testimony of about 300 witnesses and collected evidence by investigators have to be addressed or disputed, which they never really did. The evidence included dead or dying girls when Thurzo was in the castle. Again, name that I can't pronounce, argues evidence was exaggerated and that Thurzo misrepresented dead and wounded patients as Bathory's victims, as disgracing her would be a huge benefit to his political ambitions. So pretty nice conspiracy theory we got there. Leave your comments down below and let me know what you think about it. So now we're going to talk about folklore and popular culture. I really like to see things like this in popular culture just because it's something that's interesting to me. In 1729, the first written account of the Bathory case was released by Laszlo Törösis, called Historia Tragica. The story came into question in 1817 when witness accounts, which had surfaced in 1765, were published for the first time. John Paget released his book Hungary in Transylvania, and Hungary is like spelled like the country Hungary, so like clever. In 1850, John described the supposed origins of the blood bathing, although it seemed heavily fictionalized recitation of oral history. And it's not known how accurate his book is. Now, what he's referring to is Elizabeth Bathory was also known as the Blood Countess, and I think I might have mentioned this earlier in the video, where she was known for killing young girls and bathing in their blood to retain her youthfulness, which is not true. Not true. In 2006, the film Stay Alive features the Countess as the antagonist of the film. There's also a Swedish black metal band named Bathory after the Countess. I'll leave them linked down below if you're interested. She has also been labeled by Guinness World Records as the most prolific female murderer. So that's pretty cool. I grew up reading Guinness Book of World Records. It was one of those things that I would always like gravitate to in the library just to see what changed. So yeah, that is pretty much all that there is about Elizabeth Bathory, and she's a pretty interesting woman as far as like what happened to her. So I'm really glad that this was part of history and that we can learn together. So thank you guys so much for watching that part of the video. The Elizabeth Bathory portion is over, and I'm going to go into current events. Not too